guys, good morning. Welcome back to part 2 of what will probably be many of this landscape makeover. So in the first video, we showed you how I redefined the flower beds and how we removed the sod. It was an extremely big job. It was a lot of work, but by the end of it, it's just so satisfying to see how everything takes shape and to see it from overhead, to see what the flower beds look like. It already feels like a cozier space. So in today's video, I want to talk about drip irrigation, which I am doing a little bit differently than I do in my own flower beds, and I'll explain why. And then I want to get at least a handful of our structural plantings put in the ground, and you'll notice I've got them already sitting out here. So I'm excited about that. You'll also see a bunch of wood stakes kind of throughout all the flower beds, and we went through yesterday and I just staked out kind of where I wanted some of my bigger things just to get a feel for it. So that's why these are in here. So let's talk about the drip irrigation first. You'll notice that we've already run our 1/2-inch black poly. We had to cap a few things. So there were 3 riser sprinklers originally here, and they came up into the hedge that was here. And so if you can avoid overhead watering, plants in really any situation usually prefer just being watered at the root zone and not over their leaves. In our area, it's particularly important to do drip system rather than overhead because we have such hard water that eventually that water will cake up on the foliage and it actually makes the plant suffer a little bit. So what we did, we had 2 sprinklers right here. We dug them up and we put caps on them. And then this one right here, we dug up and we put an adapter on it. So it was I think a 1/2-inch male to a 1/2-inch barb. So we screwed that fitting in, and then there was a piece of black poly that came up right from that fitting right up to the soil surface. And then we put a T-coupler in, and then we were able to head off in both directions. So we just tapped into the existing drip zone or sprinkler zone for this flower bed, and we're going to utilize that. So it was a pretty easy fix for this area. The reason why I'm only doing 1 row of black poly is that the plants that I'm putting in this garden are pretty much like the structural plants, like the larger shrubs. I mean, there's a couple of perennials, but they actually are perennials that get kind of big, and evergreens and trees. So the thought is, because I'm not doing any big drifts of perennials or annuals, I don't want to waste water, which if we did our traditional like grid system of the brown 1/2-inch poly that has the holes every 18 inches, it would be full coverage water, but we don't need that in this situation. So what we plan on doing, if you come this way, you can see my first beautiful evergreen here that's kind of tipped. So the thought is, wherever I have something planted, we will just put a coupler in here and run an emitter to the root ball of each one of my structural plants. That way we're not wasting water. And my sister-in-law, who also loves to garden, I didn't really want to fill up the whole space because I know that she's really excited to come in and kind of fill in some of the gaps. So when she decides to do that, let's say she decides she wants to put in, 5 perennials right in this area, a little drift of them, she can cut into this black poly, put a T-coupler, and then run a piece of that brown drip tubing just where she wants her perennials. That way everything's kind of compartmentalized, and if you're having any issues with water, you kind of know exactly where to check for an issue. So as far as where I ran the drip, of course, right here is where we access the water. So I ran one piece over to the edge of that flower bed, and then the other piece just runs all the way around this corner. We didn't even have to put a corner coupler because it's such a gentle curve over here. And then we ran it to this area right back in here. We did put a T-coupler in here because there is a small flower bed in the back that we wanted to connect to the same drip zone. So it tees and it goes back and connects to that, but then it also runs this way. And then Aaron and I dug up a little section of grass and we just sunk it. It's probably sunk maybe 8 inches under the ground underneath this pathway. And then it comes up into this flower bed right here. You can see it. Comes right up from underneath. And then it just swings around this way. So we still have a little bit of work to do yet here. We're going to fill in this hole, and then I've got some plants and stakes I need to bring up for this area, but I think we'll tackle this in another video. So I've explained this before, actually in our last landscape makeover. If you don't have an existing drip zone to tap into, you can do this exact same setup pretty much, but you just attach it to your hose bib, whatever hose is nearest. So like if we didn't have the ability to tap into a drip zone, what I would be looking at doing is tapping into this faucet right here. We would probably have to run drip underneath the sidewalk to access the flower beds over there, but it's very easy. Your black poly would just run right up to here, and then there's adapters and pressure regulators and backflow preventers. There's a whole bunch of pieces you can put together and then hook it right to your timer and then to your faucet. That way everything's still automated. It's just running from a different water source. All right, so now I want to show you all the stuff we're going to plant today, but first I wanted to talk about planting in the heat because it is the dead of summer. It's very hot out. Clearly not the best time of year to be planting. The best is if you can get the bulk of your planting done in spring or early fall because it's just less shock on your plant. It's cooler temperatures. It's easier on everybody, but you know, I still plant all season long. I think the most important things to remember or that you need to really be on it with water. They may need a little extra water than they would if you were planting them in the spring. You just need to get them through kind of those really hot days. The other really important thing is using a starter fertilizer. Now, we did a video about biotone and how it works with your plants, but it's especially important to be using it in times where the plants are going through some adversity. So this is the biotone right here. And by adversity, I just mean heat. So what the biotone does, kind of in short, is it's got mycorrhizae in it that come in and attach to the roots of your plants, and they help build a really massive root system really quickly. And that's what you want. You don't want to be putting these things in the ground and then encouraging a bunch of upward like foliar growth. You want them to be focusing on root growth, and that's what will help reduce transplant shock and help them get through the first part of the season. It's important to use this all the time when you're planting something brand new, but especially important in the heat. So this is the first evergreen I want to put in, and I have done a video about this before. We put one in our own garden. This is called a weeping white spruce, and I just love these because it's hard to find evergreens that stay narrow, and this one does. This one grows very upright and very narrow. So typically in our area you'll see tags actually that give you conflicting information. One tag will say they get 4 feet and another tag say they'll get about 8 feet. So I kind of plan somewhere in the middle of that. Usually they get about 4 to 6 feet in our area and grow about anywhere from 10 to 15 feet tall, which is kind of perfect. There is a guy wire here, which we don't need to worry about the guy wire, but there is cable and telephone up there, electric, whatever, up there. And we usually have to make sure that everything stays under 18 feet because that's usually where the cable line is about starting, somewhere between 18 and 20 feet. So this is a perfect tree because it'll stay very narrow and compact in this area, but it'll give us some amazing structure over here and amazing winter interest. So this one right here, and I'm going to look at the tag so I don't tell you wrong, but it's a zone 2. Extremely winter hardy. What is that, like -50 or something like that, maybe even more winter hardy? They do extremely well. Spruces are just great in our area, and I really like the color and the softness of their foliage. So very excited for that. Right here in the corner, this is a Merlot red bud, and this one is actually a zone 6 through 9, so I am pushing it. Red buds typically do well in our area, even though we are usually a zone 5, although the last couple of winters have been a zone 6 and a zone 7, and we've really lucked out. But even then, even with harder winters, our redbuds seem to do really well. So I did tell my sister-in-law, this was on her list, and I thought, oh, this would be so fun to put in here. Something that I know she'll really love, but I did tell her it is a little bit iffy on the zone. So we'll be keeping our eyes on it, and we'll replace it with something if it doesn't quite work out, but I think it's gonna be great. This one, when they're established, they get darker colored leaves. This one's a little stressed because it's been in the can, but they bloom just gorgeous in the spring, and they bloom right off of their like main stems, right off the wood. Beautiful kind of rosy pink blooms, and this one grows about 12 to 15 feet tall and wide. So again, we're not going to be messing with the cable right up there. I've got it sited about 6-7 feet away from the wall and the sidewalk, so it can grow to its full potential and it won't be in the way of anything or anybody. Next plant is this cute little blue spruce. This is called a baby blue, and the reason I chose this is that it only grows about 6 feet wide, and it gives us that really beautiful icy blue. Blue spruces are a little bit harder to find in the narrow category. So this one grows like 12 to 14 feet tall, 6 feet wide, and this is a zone 3, so incredibly winter hardy. And then our last one today is this gorgeous one that I actually wanted to take to my own yard really bad. This is called an hillside upright Norway spruce. This one also grows 6 feet wide, so you know it'll take up this area. It'll be a really pretty, a little bit more height here, about 10 to 12 feet in the center of the flower bed. So we'll have some height over there. We're going to have some beautiful shrubs and things in here, but then this will provide a little bit more height. It'll stay away from the fire hydrant, which is important. Of course, it'll be a little more straight when I plant it, but this is also incredibly winter hardy to -40. So I think the most important thing though for this size of flower beds is staying narrow, keeping evergreens that aren't going to get 15, 20 feet wide, because we just can't accommodate that sort of tree in this space. And the last little evergreen I want to plant, I actually had to go grab out of the truck because I forgot to set it out, is called a columnar dwarf mugo pine. And I chose this one because it's going to be a perfect graduation of height. So we'll have our highest plant, our 15-foot redbud in the corner, then we'll have a 10 to 12-foot spruce in the center, and this one grows about 7 to 8 feet tall and only maybe 3 to 4 feet wide. And it will look straight once I plant it. It's a little bit crooked in the can. But I do plan on adding in some rocks in this flower bed, which I'm really excited for more of a natural kind of feel. But I always like to start with my structure, like my trees and evergreens. I like to start with those first because I think they're the most important for winter interest. You know, you want to make sure you leave room for things like this so that we still have something really pretty to look at in the winter time. All right, so now what I want to do is get these all planted, and then we'll talk about, and I'll show you how I run the drip from this black tubing to each one of the root balls. Trees in the ground. I want to show you 2 different ways that you can tap into your 1/2-inch black tubing to bring water to your trees. So you can go directly into the tubing with your emitter if the tubing is close enough to the root ball of your tree, which in this case it is. I've got some flex here, so I can pop my emitter in and then I can tack this tubing down right over the root ball. So I've got a punching tool here. I'm just going to pop a hole in the side of the tubing. Oh my goodness, and that is not easy to do. This is really thick tubing. There are different kind of punching tools. This one you kind of have to use your own force. There are tools where you can, it's more like a scissor, which are a little bit easier, but I forgot to bring mine today. So I'm going to put the pointy end of the emitter right into the hole I just created, and then we will tack the tubing over the root ball. There we go. Got a couple of landscape staples. See, I can just put it right up to the tree. So that one is done, and I feel like a 1 gallon per hour emitter, especially when it's hot outside, is a good place to start. And then you can adjust however you need to. If you need to add a 1/2 gallon more, you can go ahead and pop another emitter in. But it's really hot right now, and we'll be running the drip for about 1 hour every day, and then we can make adjustments depending on what we need to do. And of course, once it starts to cool off, we will not run the drip as long or as often. So it's not something that you can just set up and then just leave alone forever. It's something that you kind of continually have to keep your eye on to keep your plants happy, but it does take a lot of the watering work away. So I'm going to actually run on the hillside spruce and the blue spruce. I believe my tubing is close enough. I'll be doing the same exact thing on those. And then I'll show you the second way to tap in using cord. This red bud right here, I'm going to show you the second way to tap into this tubing, although it's almost not necessary because I'm so close, but this is a nice open area to show you. So I'm going to take my punching tool and I'm going to create another hole, but instead of putting my emitter in, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch coupler. To do this, because this is so thick, I'm going to use this little tool right here. What's this called, Aaron?
1/4 inch nut driver.
1/4 inch nut driver. That way, because there's very little to hold on to with your fingers, and these can kind of hurt, especially when you're having to use force, I'm going to pop it into the tubing with this tool. There we go. Then we're going to put our 1/4 inch tubing on, and I'm going to cut a piece just long enough to reach the root ball. About right there. Then I will put my emitter on the end, and then I'll tack it down with a landscape staple. And one more way, which is really similar to this, you can skip the 1/4-inch coupler and you can just use the emitter the same way as we did before, and then attach your 1/4-inch tubing to the end of the emitter and run it the same way and tack it down with a staple. Either way works just fine. So now we have one tree left. So we could check and make sure all the drips are working and that we're not leaking anywhere. And you can see right there, check that out. It's working. Very nice. That's always encouraging. But today, I mean, we will run the drip, but today I am going to water them all in really well with the hose. That way I'll make sure all the soil is settled in around their root ball, and then I can see if there's any soil settling, if I need to bring in any more and pack any more in around the root balls. And that's really important to make sure that all the air pockets are eliminated and everything's tucked in nice and tight. All right, guys. So we're just gonna water all the way around the root balls, and I'm gonna make sure to fully saturate this whole area. And that's pretty much it for this video. I'm really excited that we're now to the planting stage. We've got some structural plantings in. I've got quite a few more really fun and beautiful plants to put in this space, but it's making me really excited and happy to see what's going on so far. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.